Good evening. It is another Tuesday night, and we're here live, and we're glad you're joining us. If you're joining us for the first time, we always open this up for questions. Or we keep it open for questions throughout the podcast, and so feel free to use the chat box. Really encourage you to do that, to ask questions tonight. And we will run with a topic, and so if you have questions that are off topic, please, you can throw those in and just give us some time. We're going to actually get to off topic questions towards the end. And I will make one more 15-minute announcement or warning before, so folks can start filing those in towards the end. But anyway, tonight we are looking at the topic of the value of life, or why does your life matter? And I was listening to a sermon, it's actually quite a while ago. I had this thought in my ideas category, and I heard a quote by a pastor in our fellowship who was saying men need to know their life matters. And so I was thinking about that statement alone. I was thinking, generally speaking, if you asked, somebody if they valued their life, typically you would get the answer yes, but you'd have a ton of different reasons why from any individual, right? And so I was thinking about this idea is when it comes to the value of a person's life and whether their life is worth living or not, what makes a life worth living in the true sense? What not just really, I'm looking for the answer in reality, not what we make up, right?
Yeah.
And so I do have some questions for the audience. I'll hold those for a little bit as people kind of file in. But there are three main questions I want to ask tonight, or get answered tonight. One is, how do people typically value themselves? Two, what does the Bible say about the value of people? And then three, what can a man give in exchange for his soul? And that one I'll explain a little bit more as we go through. But from your perspective as a pastor, and something worth mentioning tonight is that in who we are as a church and what we do, we work with people, and that's what we do that's who we are. We work with people, we talk to people about their problems, we work through problems, we teach people what the Bible says, we encourage people to make certain decisions that can gear their lives towards something worth living. Because the truth is, there's a scripture, and I'm going to read a little bit more of it later, but Jesus says these words: what would it profit a man if he were to gain the whole world yet lose his soul? And so he's talking from the perspective of things that people chase after that actually forfeit their soul, which he is obviously placing a higher value on than the world. And so I want to work through some of that as we go. But from your perspective as a pastor and having worked with people, what would you say is a typical value system for a person's life, just generally speaking, not biblically, but people-wise, or what, from the perspective of humans?
Well, having lived in England and got to know people from different classes, it's very class-related. In England, there's wealthy people and there's poor people, and there's not a lot in between. And so being able to get to know people, and also living in Gibraltar, which is on the southern coast of Spain, and a couple other places that I've lived and pastored, it is a mixed bag, what people how people find value in life. But I find that the one thing I would say that's in common with everybody is that their value is always what they're going to be, not what they actually are at the moment. It doesn't really matter what they're doing. It's always what they're going to be in the future. And it's always this living for the future. And I've even met people that are in their 60s, 70s, 80s who they're still living like that. They haven't decided maybe I should start living, and and so I would say that that's the majority of what people try to find as far as a purpose in life, is to build some kind of future. And yeah, I'd say all over. It doesn't matter the age, doesn't matter the background.
Yeah.
Most people are just they're always chasing after something in the future. It's not right now.
So what are like some nuances to that? Because you said like the one thing that's mostly in common, but
Well, it's so people who have money are looking to make more money, and that's fairly universal. That when I say that, what I mean is that even in countries where money is not like here in America, money is, there's, it's very clear that money has a unique position, in America as compared to the rest of the world. The rest of the world, works to make money because it's a necessity. To function in life. You have to make money. But most places that I've either visited or have gotten to know people from those places or actually live there, um, there isn't that same money drive, to just have a big bank account, to have this like cash value, that gives you some sort of, I guess, sense of worth or whatever. But uh, but for people that are not chasing money, usually their value is in quitting all the bad habits that they have now. Because they're usually people who are not, chasing after money. They're living for pleasure, and so
yeah,
they're looking for, a job that'll pay the bills so that they can go party. But one day they're going to get serious and they're going to do something with their lives, or they spend too much money on partying, and so they're hoping that one day they'll, get into a position to where they can, have a greater value, and quit drinking and doing all that so much, and wasting so much time and energy. But I'd say for the most part that's really kind of what it comes down to is it's either money or pleasure that are the two categories that people fall into. The pleasure idea is to be happy with themselves. It's not just to do a certain kind of thing to be happy, although that is part of it. It's the idea of being happy within themselves. And I'd say that that's probably at least in my experience, when I think of, I'm just kind of rattling through different people that I've known over the years, that's I'd say probably the predominant categories that people fall into is they're spending their whole life making money, or they're spending their whole life trying to be happy, but you know, not long-term happy, but happy like right now happy.
yeah. So there was some thoughts that were going through my head with this, and I feel like we can be kind of personal here, but there's we're going on like I think 7 years. We've been 7 years since I was in the rehab, and
Has it been that long?
I think so, yeah. But yeah, because I was 30. I'm 37. And there was, so you picked me up from the rehab, and you made a statement to me that honestly, even after everything I had experienced in the, before the rehab, in the rehab, and afterwards, or up to that point, it was locked into my thinking, this conversation you and me had. But you picked me up and we went to a Pete's Coffee and we had this really long conversation, and it was very candid. It's very, it was very real, and there were a lot of things brought out, and I was probably for the first time in my entire life very receptive to things you were saying. It wasn't me fighting against things you were saying. I was very open. And so maybe that's why it meant so much at that moment, because a lot of what you said stuck instead of just certain things here and there barely getting through. But I remember you saying something that you said you have to learn to be comfortable in your own skin.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, do you remember that? Do you remember that statement? Do you remember what kind of drove that statement?
I don't remember any of the details for sure. It's, I've had so many conversations like that with different people that it's, kind of all blends into one. But
That's
that
actually
is
good.
something.
That's actually a good thing. So for the purpose of this
Yeah,
question,
it's something that is because you saying that I know the more lower level ideas of that, of just being, because it's just, the idea of getting away from all the traps, of external, you know, uh, I'm not sure how to consolidate this into something really quick, but the idea of not being a people pleaser, not living life, with other people, their opinions, their, majority conversation, people, how they, all that kind of stuff of just learning how to be, it really what I mean, that's probably a better way of putting it, is just learning how to be you and be comfortable with being who you are, and being happy with who you are.
Wow.
That really is a major issue for me personally over the years, is because it's funny because before I got saved, I was involved in all kinds of sin, and I didn't care about people or what people thought or anything like that. But then after I got saved, wanting to have influence and wanting to reach people, it became a very, very important thing. And I discovered, which, was quite surprising, is that, people they're really picky, about what they're going to let um, be in their lives, as far as people go. Is they're jumping, people often jump to conclusions, uh, make judgments, snap judgments, things like that, and thinking, how am I going to, be able to become all things to all men, so that by all means I might save some, like what Paul says, when it seems like people have just got such a so just also the only way I can describe it is just the such a limited focus on who they're going to let in their lives, and so for me it was like, I want to know a lot of people, for obvious reasons. I'm a pastor. I want to know a lot of people. I want to meet a lot of people, and getting the opportunity to live in England and very cheap to travel around Europe. It's like, traveling from here to Texas, is more expensive than traveling from England to Europe, and so traveling to Europe here is like, you got to save money to do all that, whereas you can just go. I flew from England to France, to Paris, for the afternoon. I just went for an afternoon, had lunch, and then flew back. And it was very, not very expensive. And so you're meeting a lot of different people from a lot of different backgrounds like that. But it's funny how people don't want to, they don't want to meet people. It's
Yeah.
funny.
So it's interesting you say that, because there was, something else you said, and I don't actually remember the exact words, but the idea was that God loves you even though you don't. And that statement wasn't made it was, I actually wrestled with whether or not to even mention this, because I understand that there are people listening, there might be people listening who, that statement's very, it's a self-pity statement. It's like I feel sorry for myself type
Yeah.
of statement, and it goes the wrong direction.
Yeah.
But the truth is,
Well, there's a better way to describe that, is that how God feels about us has nothing to do with how we feel about ourselves.
yeah, okay, that's better. Yeah, it's a better way to say it. But I got it the way you said it
Yeah.
at the time. And the truth is, I had never thought about it. I always thought that I loved myself.
Mm.
I genuinely did. I thought I did. But the truth is, the way I was living my life was very self-destructive. And so I really didn't love myself very much. And I didn't
No,
see my
that's
life
the
as...
yeah. See, that's the thing, is that's a very valid, important thing. I think that everybody needs to understand is that we we think, that we love ourselves, and I remember having a conversation with a woman and I told her, I said, just from knowing her for a long period of time, trying to counsel her, I said to her, I said, you just seem to really not like yourself at all. And she went, ha, I love myself. In fact, I just love myself too much, and I need Jesus to help me to stop loving myself so much. And I thought, well, that's a negative right there. But the worst thing about it is it wasn't true.
Yeah.
It was a front, to cover up the fact of how she really felt about herself. And so it was quite ironic to hear it from me, because it was like, no, I can tell by your behavior and the things that you're doing to yourself that that's not true. But the fact that you feel the need to cover that up so that nobody knows, I mean, how bad are you really? I mean, when it comes right down to it, because you have to cover it up and convince yourself that no, I think I'm a great person. It's like, well, if you did, then you wouldn't do some of the things that you're doing,
Yeah. So that really does kind of highlight that, this first question, the answer to this first question is that, is it possible for people outside of, well, yeah, let me rephrase that. Can a man really understand the value of his own life outside of,
Yes.
okay.
Yes. You outside of revelation from
Yes.
God.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the reason is because, and it's a point that's so critical to understand, is it doesn't matter if you believe, what you believe. You can believe that God doesn't exist. It just doesn't make God go away.
Yeah.
And anybody who will just take a few moments to consider, life, themselves, everything that's within their realm of experience. If you would stop with this, self-righteous, idea that God doesn't exist, but I'm a great person anyway, facade, you'll see that you are constantly evaluating who you are. We all are. There's a clock cycle that happens, in our brain that's constantly telling us how we're doing,
Yeah.
or how we're not doing. And we can ignore that. We can try to push it to the side. We can pretend it doesn't exist. We can say that we're monkeys that have evolved from nothing. And, you can say all this stuff, but we call it a conscience. And that is what it's called. But a conscience is more than just something that strikes you when things are going well or things are going bad. It's a constant ref in your life. It's constantly at work in your life, and you can not listen to it, but it's still there, and it's still telling us things, and so we're evaluating ourselves all the time. And so, yeah, we can know where we are because it's part of how God created us. He created us to know who we are. That's he the what I've learned, having become a Christian, what I shouldn't say learned, because it wasn't so much a learning as a discovering, is what I've discovered is that everything that was going on in my life before I became a Christian is the same things that are going on in my life now. The difference being is that I know God exists. And so it's the puzzle piece that makes sense out of everything else, because otherwise it's like, what is the point of all this? And the question is constantly asked, why, has this happened to me? Or why do I have to go through this? Or, why was I even born? The kinds of questions that people ask themselves, the whys all the time, of trying to know the point of their existence. But this is the issue, is that we need to know the point of our existence. It's important. It's necessary. It's part of our physical makeup. It's part of our metaphysical makeup. It's a part of our mental makeup. It's everything that we are is associated with that understanding of our purpose. Because if you either give up on purpose or become hopeless about purpose, you start doing things that you never thought you would do. And that's the consequences of not having some kind of a sense of purpose.
Yeah.
And meaning.
So that's actually a perfect segue into the question for the audience, and I posted it in the chat. The question is really simple: what makes a life worth living? Don't
Yeah.
You don't have to personalize it for yourself, but just honestly answer that question. What
Yeah.
makes a life worth living?
Yeah.
And let's just see where that goes, because
Yeah.
my next question for you then is, what does the Bible say about the value of people?
Okay, so we can split this and talk about the idea of your question, because from a non-Christian or Christian point of view, what makes this life worth living is the same. It really is, because what really makes life, which is sad because so many people never actually experience that, because they're too busy chasing other things. But really, what makes life worth living is helping other people. When it comes right down to it, it's helping other people. And so, that Christian or non-Christian, it's funny. I've mentioned this before, that Tony Robbins, not even coming from a Christian point of view, was in one of his seminars, was talking about that very idea, that the whole idea of life is for us to get ourselves to a place where we're happy with ourselves. Not I'm happy with life, but that we're happy enough with ourselves that we can help other people. That, so in other words, we've dealt with the issues in our life enough to where we've rearranged our lives, to be able to help other people. Because he wasn't talking about, okay, get yourself fixed first, get a lot of money, retire, nothing stupid like that. The whole idea was, deal with your problems, deal with your issues, deal with them, So that's the whole idea of his motivational speaking, is deal with your issues so that you can get around to living life, And so I think that's very, very critical from that standpoint. And the value of a human being. It's funny because you see these what is the value of a human being, and then it's put, different people from different types of vocations will say, well, if we reduced you down to your finer components, you'd be worth this much. And some come up with nothing, like silicon, you're just dirt and you're not worth anything. But then others, when they start to sift away the dirt and get to the more precious metals and precious minerals that are part of us, all of a sudden our value becomes very valuable. But the value of a person really does come down to, how does that person fit into the world around him? If there's going to be value in a person's life, it's how they fit into the world around them. Because people who are, it's funny, anybody who's worked a job with any number of employees, if you've done that, there will always be those people that are living for themselves. I mean, the time they get up in the morning to the time they go to bed at night, they're just their focus is just on themselves. And it's like, why does there have to be people like that in the world? It's like they mess things up for everybody else. It reminds me of there was a simulation that a friend of mine had written for his what do you call it? It was just like final project, for his getting his degree in computer technology, and he wrote this simulation of traffic, and it was just a two-dimensional thing with little blocks moving along. But he'd built into it, all the calculations for, how fast a car can speed up, from a stop, avoiding, what happens when you're avoiding, collisions from this side or that side. So it's all in there. And so traffic is flowing, and he's turning the speed of traffic up, and it's getting higher and higher and higher, and traffic is flowing. But then he had these parameters that he would put in, like people that are impatient, and they're cutting their way through traffic. And then all of a sudden, the overall speed of traffic for everybody goes down. for everyone because of one person who has to cut into the next lane. He cuts into the next lane, makes the guy puts his brakes on, the guy behind him puts his brakes on, and then the recovery time from all that, and then he switches into another lane and the same thing happens again, and he goes to another lane, and it's all pure selfishness. That if he was just simply unselfish, just got into traffic, he would probably get to where he's going faster than by being selfish. And that is true of all of life. When you're selfish, it takes you a lot longer to get places.
Yeah.
You can never get to the place that you want to be when you're selfish. You're always your own obstacle to getting to that place. And it's like people who, gamble, they play the lottery. You win $10 every now and then, but you're paying everybody else for their winning. When it's all said and done,
yeah.
you just get $10 back every now and then so that you can keep gambling, and so you've got enough return so that you can keep your selfish addiction going. But the truth of the matter is you're distributing your wealth to other people, and that's the truth of selfishness. Is you're always distributing your value to other people by virtue of the fact that you are so focused on yourself that you never get ahead, so just to simply, the averages of life, the opportunities that you could have taken advantage of by not being selfish, you can't. And so those opportunities get taken by somebody else, and so that's what happens in life is as you become a selfish person, your value goes down, your intrinsic value to yourself goes down, and because you're always frustrated about everything under the sun, and then outside of yourself, your value is diminished because you're not really contributing anything to the world around you.
Yeah. So a couple of answers have come in, and again, the question for the listener tonight that you can just post in the chat box is, what makes a life worth living? And so as I read these off, like, these are coming from people who have a relationship with Jesus. And so the question really is where, what does the Bible say about these answers?
Okay.
Generally speaking, this is the first answer. Generally speaking, I think relationships make life worth living.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Because the more relationships you have, the more your life is worth living, because there's a reason to get out of bed in the morning, when there are other people that you're associating with.
Yeah.
So
dig a little, let me dig a little further into like relationships. What is a relationship? And I thought about this idea, like social media, there's
probably should define
a relationship, but it's not a relationship, right?
No, there's not. There's not a relationship. Social media, there's no relationship in social media. Zero.
Yeah.
It's zero. Because again, social media it's I joke about it being anti-social media because that really is what it is that somebody else is wanting other people to see their life. They're not sharing their life. They want other people to see their life. And so that's selfish. I want people to look at me. I want people to think about me, so that's why,
like
people get it.
I want to be noticed.
I want to, and so I want them, they're when they look at their social media, they're looking for how many likes did they get, how many new followers. They're not, it's not about, them wanting to, I like this and I like that, and then following these people and then trying to find ways to meet those people. It's not, there's nothing relationship there. Relationship is a two-way street, and if it's not two-way, it's not a relationship. And, it's funny because even in church, there are people that they don't get how relationships work at all. I mean, they just have no idea because they believe that because they're going to church, they have the right to having relationships with people, and that people should be coming up. There are people I notice. I watch everything, and I see that there are people that they never initiate conversations with people, or very, very rarely. The majority of the time, other people have to initiate conversations with them. Right. And it's funny because those people that are like that, they get mad when people don't initiate conversations.
Yeah.
You know, they get upset and they get, oh, forget you. You're not going to come and say hi to me. It's like, yeah, but you haven't said hi in like 5 years.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, the second answer we got in here is a purpose outside yourself. You kind of talked a little bit
yeah,
about that already,
yeah.
but biblically speaking, like what is a purpose outside yourself?
Well,
What does that look like in general?
yeah. Well, see, this is the thing is that even, biblically speaking, and it's funny because that's, this goes back to that thing that I'm always harping on of, trying to make this distinction between life from God's perspective and life outside of God's perspective, as if there's a such thing. And there isn't. There isn't a such thing. And so when you're talking about biblical perspective, you could just replace that with the right way to think.
Yeah.
Because there's no difference. There's no difference. You could, who let, just as an example, who likes partying by themselves? Gonna go out and buy a bunch of dope and some booze and sit in front of your TV and get high and drink, and what good is that? That's who wants to do that, and so having interaction with other people is it's just a given, that interacting. So it doesn't really matter whether because I always try to keep it in that kind of perspective, especially when I'm talking to people about Jesus, because the understanding is that we are living life trying to discover what's already been shown us. It's already there. It's in black and white. And so it's very easy for us to understand what God has for our lives, if we will just bring Jesus into the middle of it. And just, okay, what do I need to be doing? What do I need to learn? And you start reading the Bible and you start, listening to people who have been Christians for a long period of time and are doing it the right way. They're not just religious people. And it's funny. I told somebody the other day, I said, yeah, I've been a Christian for 40 years. And he said, oh, my dad's been a Christian all his life. It was like, so then why aren't you a Christian?
Yeah.
That was my first question, is he's not having much influence on your life. If he's been a Christian all his lives, he was talking some 60, 65 years or something like that. And he's arguing with me about Christianity, and it's like, well, we should be in agreement. We shouldn't, if your dad's been a Christian all of his life, but number one, that's not true. You're not a Christian all your life. At some point you have to convert, you have to become a Christian. But number two, which is the more important element of it, is that, a Christian is something to become.
Yeah.
You're not just, you are one or you aren't one. You have to become one. And so, that obviously isn't going to happen before you're, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old.
Yeah.
So,
but what does the Bible say? That's probably the better way to ask the question is, what does the Bible say about a purpose outside yourself? What does it say about relationships and the value of relationships?
Okay. So it's interesting because a lot of what God says to us are in the form of commands. And it's interesting because there's a real contrast. So being a Christian, knowing Jesus personally, as I do, God doesn't force himself on me. I'm not constantly getting, these moments of, God, punishing me, by yelling at me, and in fact, I wish he would do it a little bit more often, because I don't hardly ever feel that he yells at me at all. And it would be nice if he did, because sometimes I learn afterwards that I've been doing something severely wrong and wasting time, that it would have been nice to know this before. And it's almost like I can almost hear God saying to me, I wrote it in the Bible. If you just read it, you'll know, just read it. I'll reveal it to you if you'll read it. And So that's so the Bible, a lot, like I said, a lot of it is in commands. It's talking in terms of commands. And so there are, he says, a new commandment I'll write to you, that you love one another. And the reason why he says it that way is because, okay, we're under obligation to do this in hopes that we will submit to the obligation and then find the pleasure in doing that, and realizing it's not actually a command in the true sense of the term.
Yeah.
Because this isn't God telling us to do something that we don't want to do, or that is like a punishment or something like that. This is actually what makes life work, is
Yeah.
doing those
Yeah, yeah.
things. And so when you are obeying his commands, like one of the things that I'm constantly talking about, because it's a problem that's constantly going on, especially in the time that we live in now, is that people that they just don't, like certain people, and whether they're Christians or not, it doesn't matter. And what a serious detriment to the quality of your life when there are people in your life, and it's directly proportional. The more people that you have in your life that you don't like, the more miserable a person you are. But you may not even recognize that you're miserable, because there's nobody really around you to tell you that you're miserable. Because the people that, if you're hanging around, you can only tell by quantity. If there are two or three people, that are the only two or three people that you really like being around, then you're miserable. You just don't know it, because you're hanging around with two or three miserable people. That's why you're hanging around with them, because they're miserable like you are. But if you can interact with like multitudes of people, not just that you have the capacity to do it, but that you're actually actively doing it. And so on your job, you're making friends. It's funny, because like even in the church, we've got a handful of new people, and there are people in the church that I know for a fact, and it's funny, because I was going to use this in a sermon. I know for a fact they don't know the last names of these people, and they've been coming here for over a year. And they don't know, but yet here 3 times a week, or more, don't even know the last name of the person, because they don't care about people.
Yeah.
They're not interested in people. They're only interested in themselves. And the reason why I wanted to use it in a sermon, because I'm quite confident now that during service on Wednesday, people are going to be walking around going, "What's your last name?" After they hear the podcast. See, I know their last name. I see, because I'm very social. Like, okay,
They're going to
whatever,
be tricky about it. So
whatever.
you get to.
But that's the thing,
Put
is
your,
is
put your
you,
number in my phone, first and last name.
yeah, yeah. But it's like, but yet, there's everybody, and it's not just because I'm the pastor. There's nobody that I don't know their last name, or where, I know where they work. I know their families, whether they have family or not, and I know some of the issues that are going on in their lives. And and I know these things. That doesn't mean there are not people in the church that I don't know much about what's going on in their lives right now, because they won't talk about it.
Yeah.
But that's not for a lack of wanting to be involved in their lives, and having tried numerous times to try to be involved, and they always end up just clamming up and living in their own little cave.
It's interesting that you say that idea about God commanding things, because that was kind of my thought process behind this specific question about what does the Bible say about the value of a person.
Mm-hmm.
Because the very old Testament, Moses is writing the law of God, and then you've got the Levitical law, and you have the book of Deuteronomy, and it's almost like he restates and almost summarizes the law in the book of Deuteronomy. And then at the end of the book of Deuteronomy, he says these words that they've echoed in my head for years now. He says, I have set before you today life and goodness, as well as death and disaster.
Yeah.
For I'm commanding you today to love Lord your God and walk in his ways, keep his commandments, statutes, ordinances, so that you may live and increase, and the Lord may bless you in the land you're going to possess.
Yeah.
And then he goes on to say, but if your heart turns away and you don't listen, you're drawn away. And he literally tells them, you will not prolong your days and you'll perish.
Yeah.
So it's not like
consequences.
It's not like God's not saying I'm gonna punish you for doing it. He's saying this is the way to live life to increase. Obviously there's punishment involved in some of this stuff, but But what you're saying is like he makes this commandment, but the commandment is this is the way to have a good life.
Right.
Literally.
Yes. Yes.
And so when people disobey him or disobey God's way of doing
Yeah.
things,
Yeah.
they're literally saying, I really don't value my life that
Yeah.
much.
Yes. And it's a concept that is very difficult because we live in a world of imperfect people to understand that there is one that is perfect.
Yeah.
And that one that is perfect, all the rules change. And so you if you don't learn that lesson, then you're going to have a hard time making it through life because God's always right.
Yeah.
And he's always
Yeah.
right. I mean, there's never a time when he's not right. He's always right. So when he tells us to do things, that doing things is his desire is good. You know, the foundation of God is his desire for us is good, but he's perfect. And so when anything that he tells us to do that we don't do, we are disobeying him, you know. And it's funny how easy that is for people to do that, to be able to just, God says this, but I'm not going to do it. Well, that is disobedience because you're not doing what a perfect being told you that you need to do. And if that perfect being told you need to do this, then you need to do this. It's quite simple, you know. And so you need to do what God says. It isn't a question of whether you understand or whether you like it or don't like it or anything like that. For your own sake, you need to do what God says. If you want to get the best out of existence, you need to do everything that God says.
Yeah.
And anything that you do that you don't, anything that you don't do that you need to do is just simply taking away from the benefit of what you could be having in your existence. You know, there are people, because I've been pastoring for a long time and have been a Christian for a long time, there are people that I've known them since I was young, and now they're older, and they've been miserable their entire life. But they've been, quote, going to church and serving the same God that I am. But their lives have been nothing but misery, self-inflicted, but
Yeah.
nothing but misery. People who, you know, they've decided, oh, I'm gonna, you know, I'm gonna go get a job. Like I know I have one friend of mine who him and I were, you know, we were, the idea was we're both going to go out and preach, and I did, he didn't. And instead of going out and preaching, he became a truck driver, and then just for several years was just driving around the country by himself, you know, and is like, you know, that to benefit from your existence, God commanded us to build relationships with people. Well, how are you going to do that inside of a cab of a truck?
Yeah.
You're not going to do it. It's not going to happen. But you know this is a fact. So it's called disobedience.
Yeah.
You know, and then years later, he was like, yeah, I made a terrible mistake in making these kinds of decisions and stuff like that. But then he's got another plan, you know, and it's like, you know, I've got revelation now. I understand some things now that I didn't understand before. And, you know, the interesting thing about it is I don't think anybody else understands this either.
Yeah.
And it's like, you're just justifying the mistakes that you made.
Yeah.
You know, you haven't actually repented and got your heart right.
Yeah.
You've just justified. You found an excuse. I have a revelation now that this was a stupid idea, but there are a lot of people who do this. You know, I'm not the only one. There are a lot of people who do this, and I'm the only one that's actually got revelation on it. It's like, you know, what good is revelation, you know, if you can't benefit from it?
Yeah.
You know, that's why the Bible is so in, you know, the idea of knowing things, just not, you know, I'm working on, when I say working on, I mean, because I'm kind of, you know, developing the thought more. But at this point, I'm convinced that knowing things is meaningless. I don't care what it is. Just the fact that you know something, it's meaningless if there is not some practical way of expressing it. You know, that this is the thing. You might know this thing, you might know how something works or whatever, but it's absolutely meaningless, senseless noise to even try to talk about it. because it's nothing. There's nothing to it. You're talking about something that, first of all, you don't know from a practical standpoint if you're not just talking garbage.
Yeah.
So you might talk all this stuff, and it may be things that people say that have done it, and so they're talking from practical experience, and it may be true, but it's nothing. It's nothing. It might as well be in a page on a book that nobody reads, because it's meaningless. It's not. There's nothing to it, and being able to explain to another person without having the experience of actually doing the thing, you're going to say it wrong anyway.
Yeah.
You're not going to say it right because you don't know. You have no idea. You're just parroting what somebody else said. It's like, it's like when literally, like when a parrot talks, that's all it is.
Yeah.
It's something that came, the intelligence behind that came from somewhere else. It didn't come from you.
Yeah.
You're just going, "Rah, I read this on the internet. Rah." I read this in a book. Rah, I have a friend of mine who did this. Rah. You're not, but there's nothing in it.
Yeah.
There's just nothing in it. It's just meaningless.
Yeah.
You have to know by doing. And so that's why God is so into us doing, not just knowing.
It's interesting how much work having relationships, or I should say making relationships and developing relationships is, if you think about it. I was thinking about that as you're talking.
Yeah.
I know this is like a bad, I don't mean to, your friend you were talking about, I don't mean to, this like, I'm not dissing him, but the thought came while you were talking about him being a truck driver, not having relationships, but that idea of like going from place to place, never being able to actually cultivate a real relationship with someone.
Well, because you're driving,
bouncing around.
because you're driving in the middle of the night and then sleeping during the day. This is the whole dynamic
short
of doing
conversations
that.
you might have. There's no way to work that into a proper relationship. Let's think about that. The issue of like casual sex and like, versus a relationship between a man and a wife, and what it takes to actually keep a relationship between a man and a wife, like to actually work.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Relationship through.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a very good picture of the reality of
you don't have to. Yeah, you can be an absolute loser, and maintain a casual relationship.
Yeah.
Because it's only, it's only physical things. It's not. Having a relationship with somebody requires it's demanding.
Yeah. So there's another answer here, and this is actually a different perspective. Now it's actually a pretty cool perspective to talk about before we jump to the last question. And it is 7:46. Mm-hmm. So any off-topic questions that you guys have, it is the 15-minute warning. Mm-hmm. So go ahead and toss in any off-topic questions you might have, and we will get to those right at 8 o'clock. Living, so this is another answer to the question, what makes a life worth living, is living a life doing the things that you find unpleasant that will teach you discipline or mold your character instead of never stepping out of your comfort zone. So doing things that make you uncomfortable is a very interesting thing.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. There's so much. There's so many things that I like doing now that I didn't think I would like doing.
Like what?
Well, exercise, for one.
Eating grape tomatoes?
For one. Fitness. Cherry, not grape.
Cherry, sorry, I'm sorry.
When I worked out a little bit in school, high school. So it was like from 18 to like 50 years old, I didn't go to the gym at all. I pretty much cannot remember one time of ever lifting weight.
Wow.
In that period of time. And, out of a concern for the fact that I was getting older and gaining a bit of weight, even though I was, trying to control myself as far as gaining weight. I've always not wanted to be unhealthy, but not to be healthy. That doesn't mean I didn't do things. I would do things, but as far as like going to the gym and focusing on lifting weights and things like that, I didn't think it would be something that I would enjoy doing. And me being me, it's always, go for the most, treacherous, horrible, nasty, difficult part of, if you're going to do something, you might as well do it all the way. And so a friend of mine, I had been starting to hear about the P90X, and a friend of mine actually did it. And I said, man, you look great. I said, what happened to you? And he said, oh, I just started doing P90X. And I said, I said, I have it. I actually had the P90X course. And, because I was, different people over the years. That's a great thing about gyms and weightlifting and stuff like that, is there's a lot of people who've dropped out, and you get a lot of stuff for free or cheap because they all drop out. And so I already had the P90X course, and he told me, and I said, oh, I'm gonna look into that. And so I started looking at it, and I just decided I'm gonna do it to the letter. So I literally followed it, did the meal plan, did everything. And the first couple of weeks was really painful, really, really painful, because of all the lactic acid problems and having never picked up a weight. But then after that couple of weeks, all of a sudden, it was like, yeah, I can do this. And then finishing it. And because I didn't know a lot about its reputation, it was later on that the jokes came out about how, I was going to do the P90X, but I said, forget this, man. I'm going to do something a little bit easier and become a Navy SEAL. And I started hearing jokes like that people, and it was like, it was hard, but it was fun. I mean, and the fun of it was accomplishing things that I hadn't accomplished before. And so there is definitely, and that was, for me, that was a secret, that I discovered doing that, was that there are things in life that, when you accomplish them, what it does to you. And I was talking with my son Elliot last night, and he had asked me, I'm not sure, I can't remember exactly how he asked the question, but he was asking the question from the standpoint of motivation. What motivates you to do what you're doing and living the way that you're living? And I told him, I said, it will sound very selfish saying it this way, but it's the truth, is that when you do the things that are difficult for you to do and you achieve them, you feel good about yourself, and so it inspires you to want to do more difficult things, even though they're hard things. They're and so as a understanding life, having a grasp on life is God and God's purpose for our life and all the things we're talking about tonight, I've realized, loving, unlovable people, it actually does something inside of you, that you feel, like I said, you feel good about yourself. It's not in a dopamine way, but in a way, man, my life is pleasing to God. I know God is pleased with me doing this, because I didn't want to do this. I don't want to like that person, but I know God wants me to like that person. And so I'm going to like that person. And I need to, because God says, and anything God says is I need to do, because it's going to be an advantage to my existence. And so you just start to learn how to do certain things, and you don't even have to have the emotional feeling, of feeling good about it. Just having done it, and achieving it, there is a it's a reward thing. I'm not trying to say that it's not, because it's quite clearly part of the workings of our limbic system. But I think that might be why we have a limbic system, is to encourage us to do things that we don't want to do but need to do, and the result will be a reward, that there'll be a sort of small reward that comes, and then you want to do more and more and more. Not just the chemical buzz of, like I said, dopamine, or for some people, which is the more miserable crowd, cortisol, whatever rocks you. But I'm not talking about those kinds of things. I'm talking about something that's a lot deeper. Just a sense of being godlike.
Yeah.
In a good way, in a submitted way, a humble way. I'm not godlike from the standpoint of, I'm on the top of the world, I am God, not that kind of a thing. But being godlike from the standpoint of, I'm making myself do things that I didn't realize the benefits that would come by doing these things, which are There are things that God says we need to do.
Yeah. It's quite a threshold to pass through to do that mentally. You gotta like break through some things, because the truth is, like you said, if you're doing it and you don't quite know the benefits on the other side, then
Well, see,
you have a
that's
small perspective of
but
what
that's
might
the
actually happen.
yeah, but that's the thing is that's exactly what I'm talking about. Is the idea is understanding, which is really, in a sense, this is what faith, true faith, really is that I know it's going to come.
Uh-huh.
That there's going to be a form of reward that is going to come, and so that is a motivating factor. And for me, I shake my head. I see people, they have problems, especially in relationships. They have problems with people. That they have problems. It's funny because there's just so many rules, biblical principles that are being broken by people, even in church.
Yeah.
People will come to church and not listen to the sermon, and it's like, why did you come?
Yeah.
What was the motivation for you to come? Because if you stayed home, you would get just as much of a reward as you are now,
Yeah.
if not more, for staying home.
Yeah.
And playing, and doing whatever you want to do. But to come and with the determination that you're not going to listen, and you're not going to learn, and you're not going to let God deal with you, and so that you can change, why come? Why not stay home? It's like I told a young man, he's in his 20s. I told him, I said, if I were you, I would do as much sin as I possibly can, because you're going to hell. You're already going to hell. You've already made up your mind. There's no point in being good.
Yeah.
Why be good? Why not reap all the benefits that there are, out of being bad? Just be selfish and self-centered and obnoxious and rude and steal and do everything you can to tiptoe around the laws, as I'm trying to encompass laws, not just talking about just laws like of cities and states and things like that, but laws of conduct and, all of that. Just tiptoe around all of it. Just come right up to the ragged edge on all of it, because you're going to go to hell for all eternity anyway. So there's no reason for you to be a good person. No reason whatsoever, because being a good person isn't going to pay.
Yeah.
Because you're not living for God, so you're not going to be a good person anyway.
Yeah.
You're going to be breaking this and that. You're going to have to go through all these gyrations of coming up with lame excuses as to why you had to be a bad person, and why live like that? Why spend so much energy and effort, having to lie to yourself, to convince yourself that you're a good person when you're not? Why not just jump right in? And so reward is that's a very critical element, to understand that everything has some measure of reward associated with it.
So that's actually again a perfect segue into the very last question, and we don't have much time, but there's no off-topic questions, and so if this goes a little over, we'll just take it there. But the scripture I mentioned in Matthew is where a lot of these questions are kind of coming from, and Matthew 16:24 through 27 is a really important scripture in the Bible, really for everybody in the world, because Jesus is talking to his disciples, but he says, if anybody wants to come after me or be my disciple, he says he must deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. What will it profit a man if he gains the whole world yet forfeits his soul? Or what can a man give in exchange for his soul? For the Son of Man will come, this is the part that's for the third question, for the Son of Man will come in his Father's glory with his angels, and then he will repay each one according to what he has done. So now we're talking about God paying attention to how we've lived our lives. And so you have, the cost of discipleship, you have the value of a person's soul, you have also this expected payment at the end, or when Jesus comes. And so the question is, what can a man give in exchange for his soul?
Well, I think we should back up a little bit out of that to see the interesting contrast that Jesus is making, because he says, if anyone wants to follow after him, they have to deny themselves, right? So he says that. He says you need to deny yourself. So if we think about that and we don't put any limits or context on it, which is what often people do when they read words of Jesus, is, okay, God is not interested in me being anything. This is all about him. I need to deny myself. So that means I need to forget about being anything, achieving anything, doing anything. I've got to just let it all go. I've got to deny myself. And then he ends by saying, what will a man give in exchange for his soul?
Yeah.
In other words, if you don't do what he says, you're going to lose your soul.
Yeah.
And so that's interesting, because it sounds like by following him, you've lost your soul already.
Yeah.
And so this to me is it's the secret to life, is that the part of us that we need to deny is the part that's worth losing, in order to keep the part of us that's worth keeping. But this is the problem, is that most people want to keep the part that we want to throw away.
Yeah.
They keep the orange peel and throw away the orange.
Yeah.
Or keep the walnut shell and throw away the walnut, and it's like, and they're just crunching on walnut shells. And it's like, why do people even like these things? It's like, well, because you're supposed to eat the other part, not the part you eat. But that's the problem with us, as people, is that we're always chewing on walnut shells and throwing away oranges, and, all the good things of life we chuck because it's got to have us involved in it. We have to be involved in it. Who we are, the essence of who we are, has to be involved in it. And Jesus says, no, it doesn't. It doesn't have to be involved. What you like and what you think is wonderful and all your ambitions and all your ideas and things, they are nothing, because you're a sinner. You don't know anything. You really don't know anything. You only think that you know something because of your life experiences, which is very, minuscule, and not only minuscule, but so much of it happens on the wrong side of heaven, And so, but when you make the decision to lay down your life, you discover that you have a soul. And that's what I mean about feeling good. That's what I'm actually talking about. Is there something inside of you that you feel whole, you feel complete? So like I said, it's more than just a dopamine thing. It's more than just the rush of accomplishment. It's that you feel complete. There's a wholeness that's there. Or maybe not a complete wholeness, but you are more whole than you were before. You've achieved a target that is building an existence, and so that's what makes this all work, is when you have that. And so that whole idea of denying yourself is to, so that your soul can live, not so that you can die, but so that your soul can live. But you need to die so that your soul can live. But the idea is not God's interested in us dying. No, God is interested in us living. That's the goal. The goal is living. The goal is achieving eternal life. But the hindrance to that is that we love death. We love the things of death. All the temporary pleasures of this life that once you've done them are not even that big of a deal. And like I said, we want to, it's always, what we, to somehow establish our identity, in the world, but it's not really who we are. That's just our physical body, and the deception, the lie that this life is all there is, combined together. And so there's a real powerful thing to discover, in getting saved, giving your life to Jesus, where you realize that you've got it all wrong, that the whole thing's wrong. And so that's why I say it's ironic to me to see people who are living as Christians who are miserable, and their existence is miserable. They wouldn't say they're miserable. They would say, I'm doing a lot better than I did before I got saved, because they've traded off some of their miseries for less misery, but they're still not willing to, to do that. And so what will a man give in exchange for a soul? Anything that pleases his flesh.
Yeah.
That's what comes down to, is it doesn't matter what it is, anything that pleases their flesh, they will give it up.
Yeah.
They will give up their soul. They'll trade their soul for it if it pleases them.
So this is, by the way, from beginning to end, this has been leading to this, everything we've set up to this point. This is the answer. The whole thing is the answer to why does your life matter? Obviously, this is what you're saying. And there's a couple questions, and some of I think you've answered a little bit of one of these questions, but for time's sake, we'll run through them now. About this question is about the good concept person, what you were talking about earlier. Is it possible we're confusing that concept with good mannerisms such as friendliness and politeness?
Yeah. But it's actually worse than that, because when somebody says I'm a good person, they're not being honest. They're being dishonest, because what they're doing is they're hiding all the bad things that they've done. Yeah. But they're hiding them from themselves. It's denial. It's being disingenuous. I'm a good person. Compared to what? What are you comparing to? Well, comparing to other people. So people that well that you can make that kind of comparison. You're a mind reader. You're at home at night, and when you're in your bed, you have visions of people and this is what these people are doing, and you get to see and have this powerful insight on all kinds of people. What we know about other people is probably like 10% of what's going on inside of them, and we think, oh, we got this. We see somebody who's, my wife does this a lot. We're driving. I started it, and then she kind of picked up on it and uses it against me. But see people cut you off, and I've mentioned it before in sermons. Number one, when somebody cuts me off, I've done it before accidentally. Maybe they're doing it accidentally. Number two, so what? Why does that even matter? What is me getting mad at them benefiting? And so I'll be in traffic, and and I'll be frustrated because I'm in traffic, and so she'll try to use that on me, try to use my own words against me. So, but
there's a lot of scriptures that say almost the exact same thing. Why do you do this when you do the same?
Yeah, but that's it. That's the thing is that so the whole concept of being a good person is it's full of holes. Because what are you comparing to? You're comparing. It's like it's what's called in debating. It's called a straw man argument. It's what you do is you set up a scenario that's very weak, but opposes you. It's very weak, but it's a weak opposing argument, and then you just clobber it. You just absolutely clobber the argument, talk about how stupid it is and pathetic, and anybody who believes this kind of stuff. It's called the straw man argument, because the whole purpose was just to beat this thing.
Yeah.
It wasn't to try to make a point. It was just to beat this thing, to make you feel good about yourself. And so it's the same thing with the I'm a good person thing. And any argument that you will come up with that why you're a good person, it's a straw man argument. It's weak. It's weak. It's not based on anything. I've never done this, or I've never done that, or I've never done the other thing. Yeah, but what about all the things you have done that you're not talking about? Things that you won't even allow yourself to acknowledge that you have done. Those people that you've said things to that you've hurt them and thought, well, screw them. They're going to be weak and like that. Who cares? Or maybe you did something and you walked away and it's too late to do anything about it, and you just went, oh well. There's nothing I can do about it. No point in beating myself up about this. Well, those are all bad things, but we don't call them bad things, because everybody does them, so those don't count. It's like, yes, they do. They count. Everything counts. Yeah. So if you want to talk about whether or not you're a good person, you need to compare yourself to somebody who's a good person, not to people who are not good people, And so there's not a whole lot of them around, As a matter of fact, I can only think of one. And that's why we need to listen to him and what he says.
So, second question here, and actually our last question is, can you give an example of what's worth keeping in you because you don't have to deny all of you?
There's nothing worth keeping. Nothing that you are conscious of about yourself is worth keeping. It's all worth getting rid of. There's nothing in you. Let God show you what's worth keeping. And what God's going to show you is not something that's in you, because there isn't anything good in man. There isn't. This is the whole point of this whole exercise is, I say it a lot, and I don't joke when I say this. I really do believe there's going to be a lot of room in heaven, because there's not going to be a lot of people there compared to the amount of people that actually live on the earth. And the reason why I say that is because we're just unwilling to accept the fact that we're just bad, rotten to the core. We don't want to accept that. We want to think that there are things in us that are worth redeeming. And that's why Jesus did this. Jesus is because there's something inside of us that's worth redeeming. There's a little spark of God goodness in us. No, there's nothing. There's nothing. There's absolutely nothing in us. The Bible says there's none that seeks after God. There's none righteous. No, not one. All of our righteousness is like filthy rags. It's very clear. And there, you can't use words like all and none and not mean all and none. And so it's the sooner that anyone can come to the conclusion that they are all bad and that there's nothing worth hanging on to, and then start seeking Jesus to show them the right way to go and following him, the better, because that's all there is to it. You absolutely have to deny yourself, all of who you are, whatever you think is good, along with the bad, because there's nothing, and let it be replaced with things that have value. That's why, like I mentioned about the fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, loving kindness, gentleness, meekness, self-control. All of those they're not, we don't have any of those attributes, that we don't. We think we do, but we don't. We don't have any of those attributes. There are times where we will do things that look like that, but it's like going bowling and being so mad that you throw the ball violently down the thing and you hit all the pins, and you get a strike. That's pretty much our goodness. That's how goodness works when we are good. Yeah. Is that we've violently thrown the ball down the lane and accidentally got a strike.
And we feel accomplished.
And I've seen people
so
do this.
Good at this
I've seen people do that. They get all mad and they go, "Yes, it's about time." And it's like, that's why it's taking so long. Yes. Is because you're frustrated, you're angry, you're mad. This is not a game for angry, frustrated, mad people. And that's why you're not doing so well.
I'm so taking this personally. I suck at bowling. Oh, goodness. Yes. Every strike is accidental.
Yeah. That's why I don't golf. Because golf is for people who are calm. They're calm. They don't get frustrated. They don't get mad. They don't get upset. See, in bowling, you can get a strike when you're mad and frustrated. But in golf, you can't do squat when you're mad or frustrated. You'll be lucky if you hit the ball at all, let alone get it in the hole.
Yeah, that's another one I'm really bad at. Well, that was very good. Tonight, that's it for tonight. Really glad you guys joined us. Thanks for the answers, questions. If you're joining us on Instagram, we really do encourage you to check out the YouTube page and hit up the
Madeline, the only one that went on Instagram tonight.
Yes.
Thank you. He's probably actually doing testing.
Yeah. So we will be here again next week. Pastor Ford's actually going to be out of town next week, and so we're going to have a special guest next week.
Are you?
So you'll have to look.
Are you?
I am. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Are you lying?
I'm not lying. I already told you about it. You just didn't catch it, I guess.
Oh, special guest on the podcast.
Yeah, on the podcast.
Oh, I thought you meant preaching. I was going to say you're preaching. You're not a special guest.
Proclaiming myself the special guest.
I'm a special guest.
No, Tuesday for the podcast, we will have a special guest on the podcast. So I'm really excited about that. that person was a bit nervous to say yes, but they said yes, and they are down. So really encourage you to join us next Tuesday night for another podcast. It'll be same forum. We'll have a topic and some kind of our own scripted questions, but still from the heart and still live. And we really do encourage you to come. You can ask questions yourself. And we will be here again tomorrow night. We talk about this every Tuesday night. Invite you to come and join us in person for a service if you're here in the local area, the peninsula, the Bay Area. The address and information will be on your screen in just a second. And again, thanks for joining, and we'll see everybody next week.